Everyone, and welcome to our monthly training series for JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. As you know, we are presenting a webinar every month this year about different aspects of the digital asset management capabilities of stewardship. And today's will be about project administration, which is relevant for both Tier 2 participants and Tier 3 stewardship participants who are using Stewardship STAN. There are 3 webinars in this monthly series, which we are repeating every quarter. You can find a recording of all of the previous webinars on the JSTOR YouTube channel, and it is also linked on your training handout. We will share the link to the training handout right now as you're all getting logged into GoTo. And Remus, I don't know if you want to share that. I can share it if you're not ready for that.
I can grab it. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Okay, so you'll see it in a moment in your go-to panel. And if you can't find it, just take a look for your go-to control panel, which is probably on the right side of your screen. And there's an area with a question mark in the panel called the questions pane, which functions as the chat box. And yeah, thank you for sharing that, Remus. Okay. So thanks for joining us again. My name is Elizabeth Behrens, and I am an Education Services Lead here at Ithaca. I am joined today again by my colleague, Remus Jackson, who will be helping with questions today at the end of the session. After you exit the webinar today, as always, you'll be taken to a brief survey, and we'd appreciate hearing your thoughts about how useful this session was for you. If you've taken our webinars before, you've seen the survey before, and I always like to emphasize how much we value your input about our webinars because it really helps us determine what to continue doing and what to change. If you don't have time to take the survey immediately, it will also be sent to you by email in about an hour. And your reminder and follow-up emails from GoTo also contain a link to the training handout, which will include the recording once it's available, as well as the questions and answers from today's Q&A and links to relevant resources on our support site. So here is today's agenda. I'll be walking you through the basic functionality of project creation and management and stewardship. We'll be looking at everything you need to know about setting up and administering a project a couple of different ways. And we'll spend most of the time today in the stewardship site. So please feel free to follow along on your end if you'd like. You can create a test project and always delete it later if you need to. And as I mentioned, there's that questions pane in your go-to panel where you can enter questions at any time. And Remus will be keeping an eye on your questions as they come in. We'll likely have at least 15 minutes for questions at the end of the training, but feel free to enter any questions or comments as you think of them. And now Remus and I will turn our cameras off so you can see my screen better. Okay. We are going to start for fun with a quick poll about your experience level in stewardship. So give me just a second to launch that. Just out of curiosity for our audience today, how long have you been using stewardship, previously known as JSTOR Forum, also previously known as Shared Shelf? And I know we have a few new attendees here today, so I'm happy that you've joined us. I'll just wait a few more seconds. Okay, thanks for responding. So it looks like a mix of experience, so that's always fun. So thanks for that. Okay. So as I said, we'll begin today with covering creating projects. But before we get started, because there are some new folks here, I want to first clarify some of the terminology I'll be using regarding projects, targets, and collections, because this is really an area that's easy to get confused about. These terms are also sometimes used differently in different systems. So just to define them as they're used in stewardship, we call projects the content we are working with in stewardship. A project has a metadata schema or a set of fields with specified field types, and the project itself is not visible to end users. A target is the destination for publishing content from stewardship. The target settings include field mapping information, as well as download settings and access permissions for end users in the published environment. And a collection is the published set of records that are available to end users. So for example, records that are published to JSTOR become a JSTOR collection, which is visible to end users depending on your publishing settings. So we're going to go ahead and go into stewardship now. Okay. So here I am. I'm already logged into my stewardship account, and I'm logged into my my team account where we do a lot of testing and training. So you can see I have a number of projects in stewardship already. These are the most recent ones I've been working on. And I'm going to start today by creating a new project. So easy to do. You can start by clicking this big button that says create a new project. And first of all, I'm given a choice about whether to create a brand new project, which I can customize on the next screen, or copy an existing project. So if you see this, the projects listed here on your end are stewardship projects that you have access to at your own institution. So when you log in, you'll see different projects from your institution from what I'm seeing here. These are my projects. When you copy an existing project, that means you're copying that project's fields, cataloging forms, and publishing target setup. But you can make changes to any aspect of the project later if you prefer. So if you already have a project that's customized and your new project is similar, you may want to copy that existing project and then customize it further as needed. Copying a project does not copy the contents of the project, it only copies that project settings. For our demo today, I'm going to create a new project so you can see all of the steps involved. So I'm going to leave new project selected and click next. So now I will name and describe the project. The name and description only appear here in the digital asset management environment and stewardship. And this name can, of course, be different from whatever you decide to name your published collection. So I'm going to name my project example special collections, and I'll enter a brief example description. Okay, then click next. So now on the screen, I'll choose the metadata schema that I want to start with. There are a few templates ready to go to choose from, and keep in mind that all of these templates are customizable starting points. So if you find any of them won't work perfectly for you, you can always make changes like adding more fields, taking any fields away, changing field types, and so on. I'll give you a few notes about each of these. The JSTOR template is the ideal template if you're planning to publish your content to JSTOR, as it will require the least amount of custom mapping since it's already set up to work seamlessly with the JSTOR environment. The visual resources template is based on the VRA core metadata schema for descriptions of works of visual culture. The Dublin core template is, of course, based on the fields in Dublin core. And the Archivision template is a template specifically for those institutions who may be publishing Archivision licensed collections for their users. And you can preview all of the templates by clicking the preview link beneath each one. So for example, these are the fields in the JSTOR template. Here you can see field descriptions and field types, which may help you to decide which template is best for you to start with for your project. So please keep in mind that no matter which template you choose, as I said, you can always make changes to the fields and field types, and you can consider this template a starting point for your project and then customize it as needed. So I'm going to use the JSTOR template, and then I'm going to click Finish. And then my project has been created. Next, if I'm ready for this, I can choose a destination for publishing. The options available are either publishing to JSTOR or publishing to an Omeka site. If you would like to set up publishing to an OAI server, please see the link here for more details on our support site, and contact us as directed here, and we can help you set that up. I can come back to set up a publishing target later if I'm not ready by visiting my project settings, but I can go ahead and start by setting up a JSTOR target now. So I'm going to leave JSTOR selected and click Continue. At this point, I select the access level for my collection, meaning do I want my collection to be available to anyone on the open web, or only to members of my own institution, which means my institution's JSTOR users who have registered for their own accounts affiliated with my institution, as well as those who access JSTOR while authenticated through my institution. I'm going to make this accessible to only my institution since this is just a training project. So I will select that and click Next. And another thing I have to decide here is whether I want to publish this as a brand new JSTOR collection, or if I want to add the content from this project to an existing collection I already have on JSTOR. I am seeing my own institution's JSTOR collections here, including many test collections. That these are all from my own institution. You'll see other collections from your own institution when you're logged in, if you have any published JSTOR collections. I want to create a new collection today, so I'm going to just leave it on New and click Next. And now this screen is where you edit your collection landing page details. The collection landing page will display on JSTOR for anyone who can access your collection once you have published any content to it. It won't appear on JSTOR until you have published records. And I can show you what this looks like on JSTOR. I'm just going to browse already published collections on JSTOR. And I'll just open one randomly. So for instance, this is Cornell's 19th Century Prison Reform Collection. You can see they have a representative collection image, the name of the collection, and their institutional branding. You also have the option of putting a collection description here, and I'll just open another collection. So the difference in this screen is this collection image also has a caption. So all of these things are features you can add when you're setting up the collection landing page. So back in stewardship, here's where I set up my collection landing page. So the name and description that I just entered for my new project are already populated here, but I can make changes to these. If I want the JSTOR collection to be named or described differently, I can make any edits I need to. I'll just leave them how they are for right now. At the top of the screen, you can decide whether to allow downloads from your collection at all. So to restrict downloads, you just open that drop-down box and choose no downloads. Otherwise, if your content contains images, you can specify how large you'd like those downloads to be. Here's where you upload a collection image. I highly recommend that you do this, as this will appear on your institution's landing page and will represent your collection. So you just find the image that you want to use. Okay, and you can enter, as I said, a caption for the image. So I have one ready to copy and paste into here. And this appears beneath the image on the landing page. So the collection landing or the collection representative image can be one of the files in your project, of course, or a different representational image, whatever makes sense for your collection. Okay, so when you're finished with all of these options, you just go ahead and click Next, and you'll notice your logo is automatically populated here. This comes from customizing your institution's landing page. And if you haven't done that yet, you can follow this link to upload your own logo on the landing page area for the institution landing page. Okay, so next I need to confirm the URL for the published collection. So just take a moment to ensure that the URL is how you'd like it to appear, as you will not be able to change this later. So this is the shareable URL you can use for sharing your collection with others. So you'll notice your institution name is abbreviated here, as well as the name of the collection. But you can make changes to the collection and then click Next. And then you'll be asked one more time to confirm as this is final. And click Finish. Okay, so now that the project has been created and the publishing target has been set up, you are taken to the option of mapping your publishing target. So this means that you will confirm where the fields in your stewardship project will appear in the published JSTOR record. So I'm going to give this a moment to finish loading. And I might actually refresh here in case that helps us along. Okay, looks like I went backwards a couple of steps. So we'll go through by refreshing. I want to create a new collection as we just did. And here's my collection landing page. I can proceed. And I'm going to confirm the URL. Okay. Okay, so here we are again. So now if I want to go ahead and look at my project mappings, I will click Explore Mappings. Or if I want to do this later, I can choose Not Now and access this area from my project settings. But let's go ahead and explore the mappings. So here is the mapping screen. On the left side of the screen is the name of the publishing target that I just set up. You may see more than one target listed here if you've already set up targets for your project. When a target is selected, as this one is, on the right is information about the fields in that target's collections. And just to explain what you see here, there are a number of headers across the top of these columns. The first column, Project Fields, displays all of the fields in your stewardship project. Next to that is JSTOR fields, which displays the default JSTOR collection fields to which those project fields are mapped. So if you use the JSTOR template for your project, the mapping work has already been done for you. And that's what I meant by saying that the JSTOR template is the simplest template for publishing to JSTOR. So for example, pretty much all of these fields, the project fields and the JSTOR fields are the same or very similar. But if you do want to make any changes to a default JSTOR field mapping, you can click the button that looks like a link next to any of the fields. So for example, in the title field, if I click that mapping link, I could choose a different field from the target to map to. And here again are all of the JSTOR fields that I can choose from. We generally don't recommend changing the default mapping as many of the JSTOR default fields have special functionality in advanced search and browsing to make your content more discoverable by users. If you aren't using the default JSTOR fields in those cases, then those features will not be available for the records in this project. But if there is a field in your project that you think is not a good match to any default JSTOR field, you can map that field to a custom JSTOR field. So from within this mapping window, you can choose this button at the top that says Use Custom Field Label. And then that stewardship field will also appear on JSTOR with the same label that you have in stewardship. Doesn't make sense here for the title field, but I might need to do this if I added new fields to this project that aren't yet mapped and don't fit any of the default JSTOR fields. I'm just going to X out of here, though, because I'm going to leave the mapping as is. So you can just scroll down here and review all of your project's fields and their mappings. The next column at the top after JSTOR fields is called attribute. And when this is used, it refers to a special additional label used in the JSTOR record for clarification. So for example, I will scroll down to this area where all of these fields, extent, format, measurements, medium, and techniques, they are all mapped to one field on JSTOR called physical attributes. But to clarify for end users what they're looking at when they're viewing the cataloging data, the attributes for each of these fields will display next to the values. So just for clarification, if you'd like to use the default mapping for these, they've been selected already. But you can click on any attribute to see what other choices there are if you'd like to make a change that works for your workflow. The next column, called hierarchy level, refers to browse categories within JSTOR, which are geography and classification. I'm using the JSTOR publishing target, so these have been automatically mapped, but you can read more about this by clicking the eye icon, which appears next to all of these column headers. The order column refers to the order of any custom fields you may have. And these will appear beneath the default JSTOR fields when published. I just created this project, so I don't have any custom fields yet in this project, so I can't change anything. But if I had added any additional fields to this project, they would appear on JSTOR beneath all of the default JSTOR fields, and I can change their order. And then finally, the required checkbox indicates that this field must be populated before you're able to publish a record. So for instance, I'm going to make the title field required. And that just means if I try to publish a record without having that field populated, I will get an error message. So when you're finished reviewing your mapping, you can click save, and you can always come back and make changes later if you need to. Okay, so now my project and target have been created. And of course, it's an empty project because we haven't entered any records in it yet. But before we proceed, I'm going to go ahead and create a project another way by using the collection builder tool. So let's go back to the slides for a moment. Okay, so collection builder is a tool within stewardship that quickly creates and populates a new project with your existing spreadsheet of data. Collection Builder actually creates the project and sets up your publishing target while importing your metadata at the same time. The tool walks you through uploading the data and creating the project fields using your existing metadata. You can then refine the field types and apply stewardship functionality like linked authorities to the fields. Once your project has been created, it's just like any other stewardship project, and you can edit the data you imported or add additional records as needed. So I have, again, just for fun, a very quick poll just to see if you've used Collection Builder yet. So let me just launch that. I'll just wait a few seconds. Okay. Wow, it looks like no one here has used Collection Builder yet, so that's great. Hopefully you'll, be interested after seeing it today. All right, so let's go ahead and try it out. Let me go back to stewardship. Okay, so here in stewardship, you find Collection Builder from the home page, not within a project, since Collection Builder creates a brand new project. So let me go back to the home page. And that is where the button is for creating Collection Builder. But first, I want to show you the spreadsheet that I'm going to import just for context. So it's a very simple, brief spreadsheet of data for these 4 records, these 4 photographs of tree frogs and dahlias. Let me show you the spreadsheet itself. If you can see that on my screen. So there's just basic metadata here to start. Obviously, you can use much more extensive metadata and more fields than I have in this spreadsheet. I just have a few columns here with the basics and many more records than 4, of course, depending on what you have. Okay, so I'll close this. Let's go ahead with Collection Builder. So you just click the big button that says Import Metadata with Collection Builder, and then upload your spreadsheet. So I'm going to find that same spreadsheet I was just in. And then click Next. And it'll just take a moment for the metadata to import. That was a pretty small spreadsheet, so it shouldn't take too long. And once it has, you'll be able to see all of the fields that the Collection Builder tool has created for your uploaded data. So here they are. It's just obviously using your column headers to create the fields. You can scroll down to see all the fields that came from your spreadsheet, along with example values from each field coming from your data. So this is not a screen where you edit the metadata itself. It's a place to review the fields that were created for the project. And if you'd like to change any field types at this point, you can using the drop-down menu next to each field. You can also link authorities to any fields of that type. So for example, I have a photographer field here. And if I want to link this as it's suggesting me to use a linked authority field. I can add a source for that linked authority. So I'm going to go ahead and use shared shelf names, which, as you may know, is Getty's union list of artist names plus additional names added by JSTOR. And I'll click add. And then in the future, as I add data to this project, I can link those names to the shared shelf names resource. And I'll just do a couple more of those. So for work type, I can add a source, and I'll add Getty's AAT as my source for the linked authority for that field. Okay. So go in and review your fields. If you wanted to change the names or the labels of any of the fields, you could do that too by clicking the pencil icon that appears next to each. So for instance, if I wanted photographer to actually be called contributor or creator, I can make that change. Whatever makes sense for your data. Okay, so when you're ready, and on the right here are definitions of all the field types, just as a reminder for you. So scroll all the way down and click next when you're ready to proceed. And then the project will be mapped to a new JSTOR collection for publishing, but it will not be published until you are ready to publish and you actively choose to publish any of the records in the project. So don't worry about that. So we'll give it a moment to proceed. And I see a note from Remus here that my spreadsheet wasn't visible. Was anyone able to see my spreadsheet? I wonder if I'm sharing my screen the wrong way. I can change that if you'd like to take a look at what I imported. Actually, if anyone can enter in the chat, that would be really helpful to see. Oh, can't see the spreadsheet. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me reshare my screen the correct way. I thought I was doing it correctly. Okay. All right, can you see it? Let me know if you can see the spreadsheet now. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we can see it now.
All right, thank you. I thought I had it set up correctly, but I guess not. Okay, so yeah, like I said, it's a very simple spreadsheet with very few fields, and it's referring to these 4 images, which I'm sorry you couldn't see earlier, of little tree frogs and dahlias. Okay, all right, let's go back to Collection Builder here. So all right, so the project has been created, and now we're setting up the published collection name. Okay. All right, sorry, I'm just looking for where I was in my notes. So I can go ahead and name my collection now. I can describe it. This is just like setting up the collection landing page, just like we did earlier in the other project. So I'm just going to name this something very uninteresting for now, but you can think of something more interesting when you're naming your own collection. And you'll see that whatever you name it will automatically appear as the collection URL. You can also enter a collection description here that will appear in the collection landing page. Note, you can change these later. I'm sorry, not the URL, of course, but you can change the name of the collection and the description later if you need to. And you also choose the download size from this window, including whether you want to restrict downloads entirely. And here's where you also select the collection access. And then you can just go ahead and create your project. Okay. So once this is finished processing, the stewardship project and JSTOR publishing target have both been created. So this is now like any other stewardship project. You can go ahead and upload the media files for these records. The files will be matched based on file name. So I have the files ready, so I'll go ahead and upload them. Just selecting them and uploading. And then those records will be populated once they're ready to load with the files. And I'll just open the one that loaded. So here's the image, and then here's the metadata that imported. Okay, so very easy to quickly set up a project. If you have errors upon uploading with the file name, if they're not matching for whatever reason, you can always upload the files again if there are any issues. This just works really like any other stewardship project at this point. And sometimes upon uploading, you might need to refresh for those images to appear properly. There they are. Okay, so next we're going to go back to the slides for a moment. Okay, we will take a look at my new projects fields next to see if any changes need to be made. So here are some of the elements that you can change to your fields. Field type, of course, the labels, which are the names of the fields. You can add or edit sources, default values, descriptions, and so on. Okay, so before we do that, I have another poll about whether you've ever customized metadata fields or mappings in stewardship before. Okay, thanks for responding. Okay, so we're all over the place here. Some people have extensively changed their field mappings and some have not yet, and everywhere in between. So thanks for sharing that. That's interesting to see. All right, let's go into stewardship to look at this in a bit more detail. All right, I'm going to go back to that first project that I created. All right, so let me open up that example special collections project I created that has no records in it yet. So I'm going to go into the project settings area of stewardship. So to do that, when you're within your project, just look for that project settings button from the main screen of the project. And the second tab on here is called fields. I can scroll down the list to see the list of fields in my project, and this includes the field type, whether the field accesses any controlled list for cataloging or linked authorities, and then the field description. To make any changes to any field, you just click the little pencil icon next to the field, and this is where you can edit it. So just a note here for Tier 3 users who are attending, if you're using a SQLite compatible project, unfortunately, you can't add, remove, or edit the project's fields in a SQLite project. We are planning updates to this in the future, but for now, editing a project's fields is only possible in non-SQLite compatible projects. So I'm going to open this. I've opened this field identifier to edit it. So here I can change the field type as long as I don't yet have any data in this field. If you do have data, you're not able to change it. I can change the label, which is the field name that appears in stewardship. And I can also add a default value. So if I have information I would like to add to every new record in a particular field, like maybe the rights field would make sense to do this in if I wanted to add rights information, I can enter in that default value. And note, if you go into your project settings and add a default value, it will not retroactively add that value to existing records. It will only add that default value to new records that you create to that project in that project from that point on. Okay. At the bottom is the cataloging forms area. This tells you which of your cataloging forms the field appears in. If you'd like it to appear or not appear, you can uncheck it, and we'll talk about those next in a moment. Okay, so let me just cancel out of here. And next, we're actually going to talk about cataloging forms. And once again, I have a really quick poll for you. Okay, so who primarily does the metadata or the cataloging work at your institution? Is that you, or is that mix of people in different roles? see. So looks like mostly librarians or mixes of different roles at the institution and many of the people that are attending today, of course. All right, so let's take a look at cataloging forms now. Okay. So the cataloging form is the interface that catalogers use to enter metadata in the project. And you can customize and create multiple cataloging forms as needed. Very simple to do, and you can have as many as you need for different user types or different workflows that you have. So let's look at this in stewardship. The next tab across the top of the screen next to fields and project settings is cataloging forms. Every stewardship project starts with a cataloging form called All Fields, which contains all of the project's fields when the project was first created. If you add additional fields later, they're not going to suddenly appear on the All Fields form, so just keep that in mind. You'll have to manually add them. You might want to create one or two more cataloging forms depending on your workflow, perhaps one for faculty who need to focus on particular points of data, or a minimal form for student workers, student catalogers. To orient yourself to this page, on the left here is the name of any cataloging forms that you have. When we only have one right now, when one is selected, on the right side of the screen, the forms fields will appear here in the center of the screen. And then on the right is a preview of what they'll look like, what the form will look like to catalogers in stewardship. So to edit this form, I might scroll down and think, wow, there's a lot of fields in this JSTOR template, and this is a lot for a cataloger to scroll through if they appear like this. So an easy change I can make is choose some fields that I'd like to have appear side by side instead. So in this case, I'll just put these first two fields for an example side by side. So to do that, you just select the field in the middle here, click edit, and then change the field width. So I want this one to take up 50% of the width. And you can see immediately in the preview, it's now half as long. But if I want resource type to appear next to it, I just do the same thing there. And I change that to 50% and click save. So that's one way of kind of condensing down your screen a little bit if you don't want so many rows to scroll through, or for your users to scroll through. Another thing you can do here is remove any fields. If you know you're not going to use any of these fields in the project, but you don't want to remove them from the project entirely, you can just take them out just of the cataloging form. So you can select any fields and click delete. And again, this is deleting them only from the cataloging form, not from the project. And just a way of sort of shortening the form that you're looking at. You can also drag fields into a different order as needed. So these little grabber bars are here. If you want the order to change, you can just drag them around however makes sense. So if you'd like to set up an additional cataloging form, let's say maybe for a student worker who will be entering some information for you, just go over to the cataloging forms area and click add, and then name your form. And click save. And now that form has been created, but there's no fields in it. So you can just add fields and it will show you all of the available fields in your project. So maybe if I know I'm going to have someone working, but I want them to enter some of the basic information, I can choose whatever those fields are and click save. And then they've been added. I can always change this later and add or take away fields. And then I can see a preview again on the right that I feel free to rearrange things however you like and make the cataloging form easier to use. Okay, so that is a little bit about working with cataloging forms. And the next tab in the project settings is about targets. But since we already set up our target, we're going to skip that. But remember, if you need to change any target settings in the future, you can always come back here. This is just available to you from within the project settings. So the next tab here is called Project Users. And we're going to actually first look at our slide about user permissions. So you can manage user permissions in stewardship by adding or removing users. And you can manage user access by assigning users to particular projects, giving permissions for publishing and even creating filters to specify what content they can access in stewardship. There are 3 kinds of roles in stewardship. We have an institutional admin who can access all areas of stewardship, including all projects, publishing destinations, and user management. And I imagine that likely most of you on the webinar today are institutional admins already. The project level users are the full access users, which are also known as project admins, who can access all records, cataloging forms, and publishing targets within a project. And then there's catalogers who are limited to specified records, cataloging forms, and publishing targets. So let's take a look at managing users in stewardship. Okay, so I'll go to that project users tab within this project. So here under project users, you can see a list of all of the users your project currently has. I have just one at the moment because I just created the project, and I can see this email address and the user role. I'm going to go ahead and add a new cataloger by clicking add users. And here I have the option of choosing an existing stewardship user at my institution from this dropdown. So I'm going to just add a user here. If I have a new user before I proceed with this one, that does not appear in this list. So if I look at my dropdown and I'm looking for someone that is not here, all I have to do then is go to the sidebar menu where it says admin and choose manage users. And then here I can see all of my local users at my institution that already have access to stewardship. But at the top of the screen, I can add new users. So if you need to do that, this is where you go. And now I just need to enter the email address of the new user. Okay, and then I can decide whether they should be an institutional admin or not. I'll say no for this case. And then I can choose which projects they should be added to. So I can select a project from the dropdown. And then I can choose whether within that project, I want them to have full access to all records, cataloging forms, and publishing targets, or if I want them to be a cataloger. We are, as I said, we're transitioning the name of project admin to full access. So if you've used stewardship for a while, you've probably seen project admin before, but now we're for clarification between the admin roles, we're calling this full access. So this will soon appear throughout stewardship in more places. So I'm going to specify that this new user is a cataloger level user, so I can show you the cataloger options. And here I can choose which cataloging forms I want them to have access to and which publishing targets. I can choose not to check any of the publishing targets if I don't want them to be able to publish. I just won't check off a target for them to have access to. And then there's view permissions. So these are the records that this user could see. They can see everything in the project, or if I want to be very specific about what kind of content they can see within the project, I can explore these other view permissions at the bottom, either records they've created or records with even more granular specifications. And then you just click add and the user has been added to the project, and then create users. Okay, so next we're going to talk about where you can access information about your content allowance, including your audio and video processing allowance, and your published collections usage statistics, which show where your collections are being used. So let's go back to stewardship. And to access information about your content allowance, go to the admin area on the left in the sidebar menu and choose statistics. So here you can see how much space you've used of your allotted amount. In my case, my account has 5 terabytes allotted, and I've used 1.9 gigabytes of that. Scroll down a little bit and you can also see how much of your audio and video processing you've used. As you might recall, you get 250 hours annually of audio and video processing. So I haven't used very much of that, and I can see the details of what's audio and what's video. Beneath this information is your preservation allowance if you're using preservation services, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And then at the very bottom, there is a link to collections usage data, which shows you usage information about your published items, which you may already know as the collections usage dashboard. And I'll just click that to open it up. It doesn't look like a link, but it's a link. And there's really nothing interesting here on my end because this is a demo account where we never publish anything publicly. So there's no usage displaying. But on your end, when you're logged in, you should see some interesting information about where the content you publish to JSTOR is being used. So I'm going to show you some slides of actual usage data from a stewardship participant whose identifying information has been blurred. And I did get permission from them to share this information. Okay, so here is the data with the identifying info blurred out. I'd first like to point out to you that this data came from a small university in the United States that has published fewer than 10 collections at this point to JSTOR at the time these screenshots were taken. And they were a mix of public and institutional collections, and they have some really great usage showing here. As you know, when you publish to JSTOR, your content displays and is returned in search results alongside JSTOR content. You may see quite an increase in usage and evidence of your collections being accessed around the world, like we see here. So here in the dashboard, you can set a date range. So in this example, I think it was set for a year at the past year when I created these screenshots. And at the top of the screen, you can see the total number of item requests, which just means views and downloads across all of the institution's collections for the date range specified. So in this case, items from this institution's collections were accessed more than 40,000 times in that year. Next to that is the percentage of total items in your collections that were accessed during this time. So in this case, it was 32%. And next to that is the number of countries where users requested your items in this date range. So there were 127 countries involved. And then you can see the number of page views of the institution's landing page within the date range. So people that visited the institution landing page and then went to the collections from there, more than 1,000 in this case. The line graph represents the number of item requests by collection for the date range selected. And I blurred out the collection names to keep the institution anonymous, but you would of course see your own collection names next to each color. So you can check on your usage at points through the date range you specify. Okay, so on the next slide here, you can see a list of top requested items in your collections over this period, along with more information about what countries and institutions had the most requests of your items. And generally, the biggest user of an institution's collections is that institution itself. But it's interesting to see what other institutions, who they are and where they're coming from. So in this case, we see several in the top 10 from the United States, but there are also institutions from other countries, Argentina, Australia, and the UK in the top 10. And then at the bottom is the chart showing usage affiliation, meaning whether users who access the items were from their own institution, another JSTOR institution, or those who were not authenticated through a JSTOR institution. And of course, you can download all of this info using the download button to create an Excel file, and you can even set up scheduled reporting to be sent to you. Okay, so finally, we'll talk a little, just very quickly about preservation. So preservation services with Portico are, of course, available now for all participants. And I'd love to know if any participants today are using preservation services. So one last poll, I think this is the last one, yep. If you're currently using stewardship preservation with Portico. Okay. Thanks for responding so quickly there. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people already are or are interested in it. So that's great to hear. All right, let's go back into stewardship. And I'll just show you where to find the preservation info from within a project. Okay, so to preserve your project with Portico, you have to first open your project since preservation is done on a project level. Then you go back to the project settings area and go to the preservation tab, which is the last tab. And when you're ready for your project to be preserved, you just have to click Start Preservation. It's as easy as that. This will initiate sending your project information to Portico. And once you set up a project to be preserved, Portico will check your project on a monthly basis for updates. So those changes can be reflected in the preserved data. And we, of course, have a lot more information about preservation on the stewardship support site if you'd like to see more details. So you can just follow this link to the support site if you'd like to find that section. Okay, let's go back to the slides. I think I talked a lot longer than I intended to, but we do have about 10 minutes for questions. I know Remus has been keeping track of them, and we'll come back onto camera.
Yeah, we did get one question asking if there is a template available for the collection builder that we recommend. We don't have a template specifically for collection builder, but we can maybe add to the handout. The tier 1 experience is very similar to collection builder, and the template that they use would also work for collection builder. So we could maybe add that to the handout
true.
for folks.
Good point. Also, if you have an existing project that you'd like to use perhaps as a template, one other thing you can do is go within that project and download metadata from that project to create a template for yourself. So just select a record and download the metadata for that record. And then let me just show you what that looks like. Hopefully you can see this on my screen if I'm sharing it the right way now. Once you have downloaded metadata, you can just delete the actual metadata that you downloaded and then use this as a starting template. You will need to change the header codes next to each of them. You can just remove them next to each header and then otherwise use this as a starting point if you have similar metadata fields.
Yeah. We got a question. How do institutions decide when to use Portico and when to not?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, that feels a lot like it would be local practice and a local decision. I don't know, Remus, if you have any insight about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think different institutions have different strategies for what types of what collections or assets that they want to preserve. So that would be, I think, a great question also to reach out to your success manager, whether that's Jason Frilsbisky or Lee Dotson, and they can also kind of give you some insight there. The other question we have right now is about SQLite. So is the SQLite tool available for cataloging in VRA? I'm assuming that means the VRA metadata schema. Please correct me if I'm incorrect. But right now, no, SQLite uses a specific Dublin core-based template. So that's the only thing it's capable of generating metadata for. Alrighty. I'll give folks a couple more minutes in case they have any other questions.
I'll just once again plug the survey that you're going to see when you close the window. So it just takes like 2 minutes to answer, and it's really helpful for us. So if you want to respond to that, that's great. And also while we're waiting, I will mention that our next training will be on September 29th. And that topic will be project cataloging. So if you'd like to register for that, I can put a link to that in the chat right now. And so find the chat.
Yeah, and then we got a follow up on SQLite for VRA about when that might be available. So Elizabeth mentioned we are currently working on the ability to edit that metadata schema that SQLite uses, and at that point you'd be able to set up whatever template you'd like. SQLite's output will still be specific fields, but you can connect those to the VRA template or any template that you prefer, basically. Any other questions?
Okay, well, I think I think we can wrap it up then. Thanks so much, everyone. And as I said, the handout will be updated by tomorrow with all questions and answers and the recording, which we'll make available as soon as possible. So thank you, Remus, for your help.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.